Far Cry 5 is asking a question, one of the most important questions a game has ever asked. When the end times come, will you be ready, or are you just going to let a higher power decide your fate? Far Cry 5 is a polarizing game, not only because of the themes found within, but because on one hand you have people who say it's a masterpiece of fiction and gameplay, and others who just say it's Ubisoft schlop, a boring open world with little to do and nothing to say. I myself belong to the former. Far Cry 5 is in my top 5 favourite games of all time, and I don't say that lightly. Joseph Seed is one of my favourite video game villains, only getting slightly beat out by the funny crazy man from the third game.
Shut the fuck up!
Whilst I love Far Cry 5 dearly, I am willing to admit the game's shortcomings. You can still tell this is made by Ubisoft, even with all the good the game presents. Today I want to focus on why this game has had a profound impact on me and players alike, look into why its message resonates with so many people, and look into what you can learn from it, as well as diving into the dangers of idolization and how fear is used to motivate. So sit back, grab a cold brewski, because only you, and you alone, can enjoy this video. The game takes us to the fictional location of Hope County in the not-so-fictional state of Montana. The setting of America was definitely a departure for the series, and a hell of a risk making it so close to home. Well, maybe your home. Thematically, I think it works perfectly. This is America, though it's a fractured part of it, cut off from most places. It's relevant to the themes the game is presenting about division, especially because the game released at a very political time, a time where fear of what the future holds was on everyone's minds, a time where there was a split amongst most people's beliefs, and 6 years later, its themes still resonate. The thing that I find most interesting about Far Cry 5 is how it goes about telling this narrative of tensions rising, and how subtle it actually is, until that subtlety is thrown out the window in a genuinely shocking and great twist. Before we get onto that, it's important to understand why the ending is this way, and to do so, we have to actually play the thing. Far Cry 5's structure is pretty simple, with one goal being the primary objective: take down the Seed family cult. This is where we'll face our toughest challenge yet, Jared Leto. After a failed arrest attempt and getting saved by Uncle June,
the fuck?
It's up to us to take down each member of the family in whatever order we please, each one of them representing a part of the game's overall message about life. John being about choice, Jacob sacrifice, and faith, purpose, with the father being a constant threat that lurks over all of it. The thing that makes these characters villains is how they force their beliefs onto you, as well as the rest of the residents in Hope County. So let's dissect each one respectively before moving on to the father and the ending.
If Muhammad won't come to the mountain, then bring the mountain to Muhammad. Let's begin!
John's segment is all about choice, and how only the individual can set oneself free. His motto is just say yes. Yes to God, yes to salvation, yes to the Father. The irony comes from the fact that you don't have a choice. You are forced to say yes to being saved, because if you don't, the cult will torture it out of you. To add to this theme, the game presents you with choices throughout, however going with any of them is considered the non-canon option, like the choice to walk out of the church at the beginning or walk away at the end. Both options just boot you out to the menu, and the next time you play you have to do the choice the game wants in order to proceed. Now, you could just delete Far Cry 5 and never return to it if you really wanted to, but for thematic's sake, this illusion of choice is here to almost guide you to the canon ending, as if there's no avoiding it. You can pick the bad options and no longer proceed, or give in to what the game wants and get to continue. You can just say yes. This predeterminism ties into the game's overall theme in how there's no avoiding the inevitable. None of the choices you make matter. Even something like picking your gender at the start makes no difference to how people treat you or how dialogue is said. Nothing matters. John is the pretty face of the cult, the one that makes it look all lovely and nice, that they really are a great family you want to be a part of. We've seen in real life how easy it is to appeal to people and get them to your side if you just say what they want to hear. There's a reason people idolize figures like Andrew Tate. I'm not calling him or people who like them a cult, but some people do take what they have to say to the extreme.
Recently my boys said this to me. They said they were concerned for me and they didn't like what I was doing. This is the greatest possible sign of success.
John and the father use fear as an effective motivator, making it so people have to worship the cult in order to be saved, giving the illusion of choice like joining is something you want to do. Moreover, using God and religion at the center of this belief. What I appreciate about Far Cry 5 is how the Seeds aren't just using religion as a tool, they genuinely do believe that this is all a part of God's plan. They aren't just doing all this for money or some sort of power fantasy, they 100% believe that what they are doing has just cause, and is for the betterment of mankind. At first they just seem crazy, but the thing I find fascinating is how in the end, they are right. Not all good guys, but they are right. Hold this thought because we've still got a couple family members to go through, and just saying yes isn't enough. You have to give something in return.
Now, collapse is upon us. In this time, the lives of the few outweigh the lives of the many. And when a nation that's never known hunger or desperation descends into madness, we'll be ready.
The eldest brother Jacob represents sacrifice. In order to be better, according to the cult, you have to give something away. Let go of an important part of yourself in order to grow as a person. Only you, and you alone, can make that happen. Speaking of that song, when I heard it at the start of Deadpool and Wolverine, I almost had a panic attack like Punisher in that one scene. Jacob handles the militarization of the cult. He's also ginger. Jacob is probably the most troubled out of the family, having PTSD from serving in the army. This doesn't excuse his actions, it's just good to understand why he is the way he is. His missions all lead up to you unintentionally sacrificing Eli through manipulation and deception. These levels are fantastic, giving you the same rooms to fight through over and over again, doing the same exact thing, to the point it becomes routine. By the fourth time you're shooting your way through, you don't even stop to realize that the people aren't disappearing into smoke like they had been previously, until it's too late and one of our main friends is dead. Eli was someone who helped you for a brief time on your journey. If I had a complaint, I think we should have spent a lot more time with him, as his sacrifice is meant to be a big turning point, but just feels a tad underutilized when it comes to Jacob's plan. If we got to properly care for him as a character, this would have genuinely been an horrific moment, and would have fed into the idea of sacrificing something, or someone, in order to change, more so than it already does. Nevertheless, the message still gets across just fine. My interpretation from having to do the same room over and over again is a lot like Vaz's speech from Far Cry 3. It's insanity doing the same thing without change, and Jacob is saying to change, you have to sacrifice something you care for, or you will just keep slipping back into the same routine. Speaking of repetition, now's a good time to briefly touch on the gameplay. It's typical Far Cry. It's fun enough, though gets tiring if you play it for too long. There's a lot to experiment with, but not enough to separate it amongst most Ubisoft games. There was more innovative games releasing in 2018, and Far Cry 5 doesn't do much gameplay-wise to make it stand out. Its world is also nothing that special, only being held up because of the setting. Montana is beautiful, there just isn't enough to make it incredible. The game's social commentary and story is definitely the most intriguing part. I just felt I had to bring up the gameplay in contrast with the story to make you understand that Far Cry 5's narrative is the thing I care about the most, if you couldn't tell already. However, if you haven't played it yet or want to go back, there's definitely something to gain from it. Experiencing the story is one of them, but if you want something chilled out to play that you don't have to think about, then Far Cry 5 is your man. Or woman, I'll let it decide what it wants to be. Back to sacrifice, the father also gave something up. After his pregnant wife was killed and his daughter barely survived, he thought this was a test from God. At this moment, he heard God's plan, and in a truly shocking decision, showed his devotion by... I can't really get into it on YouTube, but let's just say his daughter didn't make it, and the father may have been responsible for this. It's very much like the story of Abraham and Isaac. I will be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable when it comes to this sort of thing. I think this is where the main influence for this narrative choice comes from, where God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, although in that story I believe God steps in at the last minute to scold Abraham for doing everything he says. In Far Cry 5, it's for Joseph to show his willingness to do anything that serves God, even if that means taking away something he cares for deeply, and this time God doesn't intervene. Obviously, this is a very messed up thing to do and makes the father a truly despicable person. It gives us a backstory for him and how his cult came to be after he heard what God's purpose for him was, and this leads me on to Faith.
He gave her hope and confidence. The father showed her how special she was. She was full of love and life. He gave her a new family, one that accepted her just as she was. The young woman no longer wished to die. She had been given purpose.
Her area has a massive fentanyl crisis, and Faith herself is the most tragic member of the family, being drugged up and forced to comply with what the cult asks. She's drugged up to the point of insanity, and her purpose in the family is to get followers high on bliss to make them see what their purpose should be. Her point in the story is to show what the player's purpose is and how it interconnects with what the father believes is coming, also tying back to choice like John presented. This is our destiny, and we get to decide what it's going to look like. But not really. She uses the marshal to get this point across as he talks to us about what it's like to live and how most of us just do as others ask, going from task to task, never being truly free, constantly wearing a social mask. The question it raises is if this really is living. The cult see themselves as a way out, especially with the in-game tensions rising, and ask for the individual to figure out what their purpose in the world should be. Insert Dark Souls reference here. What do you want to be? You best answer this question quickly, because before you know it, it may be too late. Faith is the least interesting character out of the group, though her levels are the most memorable, being extremely trippy and having an abstract feel to them. You can see why people who join the cult are seduced into this lifestyle. Similar to the rise of counterculture in the 60s, the cult is saying we are anti-establishment, whilst fueling hypocrisy by being extremely strict with the members. They market themselves as something free from the rest of the world, in reality are just as controlling and tyrannical as the people they are going against. You can definitely draw some comparisons between the Madsen family, and I'm almost convinced that's the main influence for this area and some aspects of Joseph's character. The cult's message is about freeing ourselves for when the new world arrives so we can create a better one for the future. The father argues that in order to improve we need to start again, and that's why he's gathering as many members to the cult as possible. He believes that's his purpose, to save the lives of as many people he can before the end times are upon us. The problem with all this though, is everything is forced onto you. You don't actually get a choice. The cult picks what you sacrifice, and your purpose is told to you. The cult gain followers through fear and torture, only gaining mass due to this.
It means the world has been cleansed by God's righteous fire. But most of all, it means I was right.
Once we've taken down each family member and put an end to most of Joseph's cult, we go to arrest him, and as we do so, that's when Far Cry 5 hits you with the shocking ending. The father was right this whole time. Like I said earlier, the guy is not in the slightest good for his actions, but he was right, and there is an interesting point to be argued that he was saving lives. Is there some sort of justification for what he was doing because it involves saving people, going so far as to set up bunkers across the country with plenty of food and water supplies? Or was he just a crazy person who forced his belief onto everyone else, no matter if the world was ending or not? It's the moral ambiguity of the father's actions that make him such a phenomenal character. Was he a part of God's plan this whole time, truly being the key to everything? How he ties into our choice at the end suggests this. The nukes don't seem to go off if we just leave him be, though this is considered the non-canon ending, so it doesn't matter. The end times come the second we, the deputy, arrest him. Like he states, God will not let you take me, and we have no choice in the matter. Was Joseph's seed truly the answer to everything, or was it all just extreme coincidence? That question is irrelevant because what matters is that Joseph was right. He had prepared for the collapse, and he knew it was coming. By the end, it's just you and him left in a bunker with the unknown future ahead of you. I mean, he was in New Dawn, but we don't talk about that. Please don't make me talk about that.
Release me! Release me!
I find this ending interesting because of how grim it is. The villain was right, all your friends are dead, all of Joseph's family is dead, and now you two will be trapped for an unknown amount of time together, with Joseph probably preaching to you constantly. Not counting New Dawn because its existence retroactively ruins the ending of this game, so I pretend it doesn't exist. There's a lot left to interpret with this ending. Would the deputy eventually turn to Joseph's side, or would he manage to break out somehow and kill him? How would Joseph treat you? With wrathfulness for how you killed his family, or forgiveness understanding where you were coming from? The creepiness of how he says the final lines suggest it could be either. Far Cry 5 is not a perfect game, but its ending is pretty damn exquisite. It dared to do something that hadn't really been done before, at least for a Ubisoft game. Ask things that you may be afraid to ask yourself. Should you prepare for the apocalypse, Or should you just see what happens tomorrow? Is forcing a belief on someone justified if it means saving them? What is choice? What is sacrifice? And what is purpose? What do those things mean to you, and how do they affect your everyday lives? Do we actually make choices for ourselves? Is sacrifice important to be better? And what is our purpose here? These are all things Far Cry 5 digs into to various degrees of success, leaving a lot of it ambiguous for the player to decide. But the point is, it tries, and sometimes that's enough. The thing the game is renowned for the most is its ending, and it wouldn't be this way if it wasn't for everything else striving towards it. There is always going to be fears of nuclear war, of how the end times are coming, and the game dares to look at what we'd be like as a species just before the collapse, how it looks to someone who didn't see it coming, and the final question Far Cry 5 is ultimately asking is what happens after the end times? What happens when the new world comes? Well, that's your choice to make. Or is it?
Mercy me, oh mercy mine. Down on my knees, I got my arms stretched to the sky. Trouble to the left of me, sorrow to the right. Can you hear me, Lord, and can you lead me to the light? I lift my voice, I call your name as I toil down in this valley.